Hi, my name is Sam Johnson and I'm a voice teacher. Today I'm going to be reacting to and analyzing Tones and I performing Dance Monkey in their US TV debut.
Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh.
Oh, this is... okay.
I've never seen anybody do the things you do before.
I've been fascinated by this person's voice, by this woman's voice. Every time that I have heard it on the radio, it's so interesting. And voices generally don't do that to me all the time. So some of the technical things that she's doing, I'm not sure exactly what she's doing, and I would love to hear what her spoken voice sounds like. So one of the important things for, I think, voice teachers to do is when you're evaluating a new voice, you have to interview them a little bit. And some of it is to find out what their goals are and everything about them and their background and all of that. But a lot of it is just so that you can hear how they use their voice, honestly. So if you ever have a lesson with me, that's kind of why I like to talk for 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning, is just so I can kind of have a listen to what your voice sounds like. Because then I have a kind of baseline to compare your singing to. With her, I won't have that baseline, so I can just kind of go by speculation. But it is such an interesting tone. I don't know, it's gonna take a little bit for me to kind of understand what's going on.
They say, move for me, move for me, move for me,
It sounds like kind of just an
when
elevated
you're done,
larynx.
I'll make you do it all again. They say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, 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 oh. I never seen anybody do the things you do before.
Good, so she's taking her that's and putting a kind of duh into it, and she's softening everything, so it's not hard plosive things, it's that over and over, which is an interesting thing in just her accent, her singing accent, because everyone has their own singing accent. And I think that that's why most singers, regardless of where they're from, when they're singing the same song well, you probably won't be able to tell huge differences more often than not, because vowels that work well for singing just work well for singing. It doesn't really matter where you grew up. And so a big part of being a voice teacher, I think, is taking some of the tendencies that we have from our regular accent, from however we grew up, and adjusting those to fit the song a little bit better. So with hers, like, that's one of the things in her singing accent that just makes her sound like her. I am hearing just a little bit of an elevated larynx, which is encouraging just a little bit more of a chesty pull type sound. And then she gives this big release at the top where she kind of flips every once in a while. So stylistically interesting. I'm not completely sure how repeatable that is yet, but we'll keep listening.
They say, move for me, move for me, move for me, And when you're done, I'll make you do it all again, all again.
So that last part, if we're getting really picky, which is the point, right? There were a little bit of intonation issues just on those last 3 notes. I think it's because she sang the part right before really, really heavy, and then she sang that section very, very light. And when we go from reasonable vocal cord closure, or arguably too much vocal cord closure or adduction, to almost none, to a very breathy sound, it's a total jump. It's this massive change in tone. It's hard to get pitch really, really well. It's just difficult, and that's why I think it's important to get used to making quiet sounds, not breathy sounds. And then once you get used to that, like, you just have to tune to it, because they're both coordinations that are fair. I don't think that either, if we sang an entire set like that you'd feel like awesome at the end of it, or have all of the vocal facility that you might have had at the beginning of it, just because those sounds tend to use up your vocal capital. But just bouncing between them, it becomes even more important for you to have each of those coordinations completely tuned in, because they're so kind of counter to each other. And as soon as we go into one extreme, coming to this other extreme is really hard without moving through everything in the middle of it.
They say, oh my God, I see the way you shine. Take your hands, my dear, and place them both in mine. You know you stopped me dead while I was passing by.
This is
And now
fun.
I beg to see you dance just one more time. Ooh, I see you every time. And oh my, I like your style.
She is using that flip as a stylistic thing at the end of almost every phrase, sometimes multiple times in a phrase, where it's just disconnecting. A similar thing is the singer in the Cranberries did a lot of those, rest in peace. But it's a cool stylistic thing. It is really popular in today's pop music to kind of flip at the end without any necessary pitch that we're aiming for, but just to get that release. As a listener, it might be because we feel all of that energy and this kind of build up when she's singing the beltier kind of bits, where when her larynx is a little bit elevated, which is giving her a little bit of that baby voice sometimes, it can become kind of stressful to listen to. And so having that release is kind of just a pressure release valve, I think, for the people listening. Also for her, just to make sure that she's not staying in that super pressured place all the time, that she is getting a little bit away from it sometimes.
You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh.
Her vowels are actually pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of vertical space on them, and I'm not seeing a lot of pull chesty vowels, so we're just getting that tone from whatever her regular anatomy is, her biological sound that is different from one person to the next, just because no two people except for twins have like that same anatomy. So some of it is just like inherent in her voice, but I do think that there's just a little bit of her larynx raising a little bit. And when the larynx raises, I got this from Jack Lavigne, who's another vocal teacher on YouTube and does amazing like classical instruction. He was talking about how when the larynx raises, you can't get vocal tilt. You can't get cricoid cartilage to tilt forward, which helps in maintaining evenness of tone and with stretching and thinning out your voice, which kind of in turn results in a very chesty pulled sound. And so she's getting that. And I think that laryngeal height, only go as high as you need to create the sounds that you're wanting. And for most people, they're not trying to get this kind of funky tone that she's getting. And so it's better to ask for a slightly depressed larynx. But because it's a little bit elevated, I think that's giving us some of the intensity of sound that we hear from her. And then that buzz gets filtered through her vocal tract, but she's using good vowels with it, like nice tall vowels rather than really wide vowels. Especially on the o, you can see that she goes into this o place where there's space between her teeth. She's not going o. It's very big, and it's kind of emphasizing some of the lower harmonics that are created from that buzz at her vocal folds. But because the buzz from her vocal folds, it almost sounds like super twangy. I don't know, we get this interesting duality of like really intense high harmonics from her vocal tract and then emphasizing just the low ones from the vowels that she's using. It's weird. It's interesting. I like it. It sounds balanced so far. Like, that's where it's kind of up to the singer to decide, can I do this a million times in a row? Because you can find balanced coordinations with a bunch of different coordinations. It's all about like trial and error and finding what works for you and what's repeatable. Because if she gets huge and is touring and playing 6 shows a week, like, if this is not going to be sustainable, it will manifest very quickly that it is not sustainable.
I never seen anybody do the things
But it sounds sustainable to me.
Say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey.
Gosh, I want to keep listening to this, but like there's so many interesting things that just kind of keep making me want to stop. it almost sounds like she's trying to imitate someone who has had vocal damage with just a little bit of extra breathiness and raspiness at the beginning of some of her phrases. But then as she starts going toward those higher notes, it clears up. So I would love to know if she has any history of vocal damage, or if, as voice teacher, one of the things in the kind of questionnaire would be finding out, does she smoke? Does she drink a lot? Does she, like, what are some of the things that could affect her actual instrument, so that we can decide, are the sounds that you're making purposeful and intentional, or is it vocal damage? Is it an injury? I would doubt that it's an injury from her, though. I think that she's just doing this on purpose, because it doesn't sound really pressurized, even though it sounds like her larynx is elevated. And when she opens it up to the my eyes, she does open quite wide as well, but it doesn't sound pulley to me. It just sounds thin, which such an interesting voice.
Been dancing my whole life, but still you beg to see me dance just one more time.
One more dime, again, not using that aspirate T, time.
And oh my I like your style. You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Anybody do the things you do before. They say, move for me, move
Some
for
of
me,
that
move
kind
for
of
me.
singer's accent that she's using, where she's taking all of those plosive sounds, the very aspirate, like a t and a the, and turning it into a d and a d. It's almost like what would happen if you were trying to imitate having a cold. Hello, please. I'm busy right now. And it's interesting that she's kind of singing through that, but it doesn't sound hyponasal. It only sounds like she's using that for effect. Because when she goes up to some of those higher notes, I hear some necessary nasality that's kind of protecting her against overpressurizing. And then also just those really nice tall vowels are helping protect from too much compression and too much pressure as she's singing.
And when you're done, I'll make you do it all again. They say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me. Oh, 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 oh.
We're not noticing any other intonation problems as soon as she starts using more chord adduction.
They say, move for me, move for me, move for me. Hey.
That time it proved that she doesn't have to yell to get up to those high notes. It was in an A, which is generally where chest pullers, if they are going to only pull chest and there's not any sort of head mixing into it, you're not going to have very much dynamic control. And she just sang that on an oo connected, where she brought it down and it sounded like full voice without getting super loud, like it was just a moderate volume. Another thing that's interesting is her use of vocal distortion on some of the notes, where she's trying to some of the distortion is that breathy sound. I do consider that kind of a distortion. And then another one is the more well-known kind of growly sound or raspy sound. Ha, 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 hey, say, just using a little bit of that, where I'm not sure if that's like as good of a way to do it, that if she just straight up screamed as if she was doing some black metal or, you know, hard rock styles of music. I'm not sure if it would work for a continuous time, but she's just adding a little bit on at the beginnings of phrases and for like a few words, and it sounds fine to me, because as soon as she does it, when she goes into more of her clear singing, I don't hear any dysfunction when she gets to that clear singing. So usually if you're gonna like mess up your voice by screaming, as soon as you try to actually sing something, you might crack or you might find some funkiness, and maybe she's hiding it. Maybe it's not like the biggest maybe it's not the healthiest sound that is possible to be created, but you can create some distortion without wrecking yourself. And it doesn't sound grindy on the chords. It kind of sounds like a filter above it when she's doing that. I want her to sing really heavy music. because it would be fun to hear.
And when you're dying, I'll make you do it all again.
Yeah, and then we get a little bit of instability as soon as she starts adding back in that very, very breathy tone, because it's such a drastic change. I'm sold. I like her. I think she's a really cool performer. Her body was involved the whole time. The sound was interesting. I like it. I like it. The thing about making sounds like this that are so distinct is just versatility. And so for most singers, we aren't famous, and so we have to do a bunch of different things. And that sound, like, that's that sound. And maybe she can sing a bunch of other styles. I would guess that she can sing a bunch of other styles. But the danger as someone learning to sing while imitating someone like this is that's all you sound like. And we don't want that. So make sure that if you're like trying to start doing these things, you're recognizing the stylistic choices that are working for her, but still aiming for a really balanced production in your own voice. And then once you find what balance feels like, then play around with those stylistic elements that, you know, we don't want to get super locked in on. I think that that's something that happens really often is people just rush into trying to sound like their favorite artists, and they don't learn what their own voices feel like and what works for their own voices. And it's like, yeah, maybe she is able to make these sounds repeatedly for a career that'll last 40 years. I don't know. Time will tell. She probably knows better than I do based on just her work ethic and on how it feels. But if it feels pretty good, like, keep running with it. And so for people who are learning to sing and wanting careers like that, like, you have to listen to your body rather than trying to sound like other people all the time. And I do think that generally the best vocal technique is vocal technique that feels good. And when you're in that place, the tone kind of comes with it. If you're singing things that feel really good, you're probably sounding pretty good, or at least pretty authentic to yourself. And in a world where everyone is trying to sound the same for some reason, I think we could really look to find a little more authenticity and uniqueness. And she is very unique and, to me, authentic. Like, it doesn't sound like she's putting on some crazy voice, even though she's doing some things that are generally not taught as perfect vocal technique. But I think it's awesome. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and leave a comment below. Please comment below. I want to get recommended to people again because I want to help a lot of people learn these things, and also for more selfish reasons. But the main thing is leave comments, and that will help things out a lot. So thank you so much for watching. Have an excellent day.